Hi, welcome to Ask Me About Dyslexia. My name is Pam Spock, and I'm a dyslexia specialist. In my pursuit of continuing education, I have met people from all over the country who work with students who have dyslexia. Every single one of them has a story about how they ended up getting into the work of helping kids with dyslexia. And it's almost always because they have a family member who has it. I love to hear their stories, and so I thought you might like to hear mine. I am not dyslexic. I have always been a good reader and a good speller. In fact, the language arts are my forte. I love words and grammar. I'm pretty much a grammar nerd. I even think in words, like I see pictures of words in my head. I never dreamed that I would have a child who struggled with reading and that he would come to hate reading and school in general. And I certainly never dreamed that I would be on the path that I am on now. Now, I had heard about dyslexia when I was in college, but not much. After college, my husband and I went to Guam to teach at a Christian school there. And I taught kindergarten, and of course that's the grade where kids learn how to read. Every year I had a few students who struggled to learn how to read. Well, like I said, I had a little bit in college about dyslexia, but I thought it was really rare, and so it never entered into my mind that that could be why my students were struggling. Well, after 6 years in Guam, my husband and I moved back to the States when we started having children. I had always planned on homeschooling my kids. Since I had an education degree, I figured that I would teach for a few years and then I would stay home and teach my own children. Well, I don't want to give away the whole story of why it didn't work out yet because I'm going to save my son's dyslexia story for another video. But to make a long story short, it did not work out for me to homeschool. I tried, but it didn't work out. So more about that in another video. And I ended up sending them to school. So I stayed home with my children for 7 years, and for 5 of those years, I ran a home bakery. And I loved it. I loved the customers, but I got burned out, pun intended. And so I went back to teaching. Now, just to show you how exhausting the baking business was, I went back to teaching. So that just shows you right there how bad off I was, how tired I was, because teaching is an exhausting profession. You're probably wondering, why in the world am I bringing up a baking business? Well, you'll see at the end, okay? It will come around. There is a reason. So when I went back to teaching, I taught 5th grade. And I was reintroduced to dyslexia by some parent, teacher, therapist conferences right at the beginning of that year to discuss accommodations for some of my students. Now, I knew next to nothing about dyslexia. Here was an expert, and she was telling me about dyslexia, and they were asking for accommodations. And since she was the expert, I just went right along with it. I didn't know until later that sometimes it's difficult to convince teachers to use accommodations. But I didn't know anything, and I figured she's the expert, so I just went along with it. Anyways, the certified academic language therapist who was at the meeting was named Becky, and she has come to be a very good friend and mentor to me. And just not long after those first conferences, she actually did a workshop where she taught about the basics of dyslexia. And I went to it and my eyes were opened. Oh, I thought about all the people from my past who I could now see were probably dyslexic. I thought about students that I had had who were probably dyslexic. So since I was teaching language arts in fifth grade. I had one class in the morning and one class in the afternoon, all language arts, reading, spelling, and grammar. I was able to hear the fifth graders read, and so I could very easily, very quickly recognize which ones were struggling the most and showing those signs of dyslexia. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't know what readers should sound like in other grades, and that turned out to be bad for my son, who was struggling in school, and I didn't really know why. So he struggled for a couple years, and like I said, I'm going to do a separate video for him. But to make a long story short, once again, he had a teacher who recognized the signs, and so we had him screened. Becky screened him and was able to confirm that he is indeed dyslexic. Well, that put me on a different path. Immediately, I wanted to learn how to help him. And I distinctly remember standing in the breezeway between two of our school buildings talking to Becky, and she said, I really need to clone myself. And the reason that she said that is because the need for students who have dyslexia to get help was greater than she could ever meet. If you think about it, if 1 in 5 people has dyslexia, then there's going to be several in every single classroom. There is no way in the world that one teacher can meet that need, even in a small school like what we were in. There's no way that one person can meet that need. And so she really needed another person to do what she was doing. And at that moment, it was like my future came into focus, and I knew that I wanted to be her clone. I wanted to step up and meet that need. So I signed up for the very first Orton Gillingham based seminar that was going to be in my area. It turned out to be a week-long boot camp style course, and it was all new to me and a ton of information, and it was like drinking water from a fire hydrant. And whoa, I knew that this was stuff that I needed, and I wanted to learn it, but it was an intense week. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I started to try to tutor my son using that material. But I ended up switching over to the Barton system of reading and spelling because it is made with the idea that a parent can tutor their own child. And it comes with training for every level, so you kind of learn as you go instead of learning everything all in one week. And it's all scripted, so you just go right on through at the pace that the student is able to master the material. So I started using that to tutor my son. And I made it my goal to open a tutoring practice and build it to the point of being able to leave the classroom and do it full time. So I decided that having the ability to screen students for dyslexia would be a good way to get new clients. And so I took Susan Barton's screening seminar, one of the last times that she offered it. She is working on a video course for that. But I am very thankful to have been able to take it because it was incredible. It was one of the best seminars I have ever taken, hands down. And I left there absolutely on fire to help kids with dyslexia. And I just hated that I had to wait. I was already committed to another year of teaching, and I knew that I wasn't in a position to just leave that without having something else going on already. So I committed to to building my tutoring practice as I continued to teach, and it was a lot of work. I took many seminars and workshops to round out my skill set. I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and work on something for my business. I watched some videos or read something about how to build a business while you're still working a full-time job. And it said to get up early while everybody else is still sleeping and get stuff done, that you're killing it while the rest of the world is still in their beds. And so I knew that even though it was going to be hard, it was going to be temporary. So I taught fifth grade by day, and then in the afternoons and evenings, I tutored kids at an office in my home. And so even though it was hard, I knew that it was going to be temporary. So by the end of that school year, I had become a certified Barton tutor, and I had built up my tutoring practice to the point that I was able to leave the classroom and tutor full time. And I am so, so thankful. I absolutely love what I do. It's not always easy, but I still love it. And I'm so thankful that I'm able to do it. This was never anywhere on my radar. But if you look at my love for teaching, my entrepreneurial bend, see, I told you the baking business was in there for a reason. And this was actually, my tutoring business is actually my 8th business that I have started. The baking business was the most successful up until the tutoring business. But anyways, if you take my love for teaching, my entrepreneurial bend, my interest in language, and my experience as a mother of a child who has dyslexia, you can see how God just orchestrated everything in my life to bring me to this point. And I have now been working as a dyslexia specialist for 3 years, and 2 of those have been full-time. So you may be wondering, what prompted me to start this channel? When I first found out that my son was dyslexic, I started attending a parent support group at our church that was being run by my friend Becky. And she would just share so much good information every time that we had a meeting. And getting to hear from other parents, it was just so helpful to know that I wasn't the only one struggling alone. Other people have these struggles and frustrations. And Becky had been praying that the Lord would bring somebody to help her to run this program. So, of course, when I started to become her clone, and by the way, she is so amazing. I really can't call myself her clone, but I at least try. But anyways, she asked me if I would help her with support group. And so I started speaking a couple times a year at the meetings. And I would prepare and be all fired up to talk about whatever the topic was for that evening. And only a handful of people would come. So I began to think, how could I reach more people with this information? So many people need it. Teachers need to know about dyslexia. Parents need to know about dyslexia. Everybody needs to know about it because it would help you to understand your fellow humans better. So I decided to make this channel so that I could share more information. I already had a lot of it prepared from the presentations that I did at the support group meetings, and so I figured, why not make some videos? So I hope that you enjoyed hearing my story about how I ended up working with kids who have dyslexia and how I ended up starting this channel. Maybe it has been helpful to you in some way, or maybe inspired you in some way. Even it might have inspired you to start your own business, or to look at the various experiences that you have and to put them together in a new and different way. So just thank you again for watching. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I hope that you will stay tuned for when I share about my son's story of dyslexia. I tried hard not to give that all away in this one and just focus on how I got into working with kids with dyslexia. So I hope that you'll come back for that story when I do it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I am like the and do I have prompt? No. No.